Welcome to 3D with Layered WT. Today I'm going to show you how to use Blueprint interfaces to handle your interactions between different types of actors in Unreal 5. Interfaces perform well and are simple to implement. They just require some upfront setup. Technical details on why I'm using interfaces here and not casting is at the end of this video. Let's get right into it. First, I drag and drop a copy of the default third-person character into my working folder and rename it something useful, starting the name with BP_ for Blueprint. Next, we need to make another blueprint so we have something to interact with. Choose Actor as the parent class. Lastly, we need to make our blueprint interface, and we can find this in the Blueprint menu by right-clicking in the content browser. Next, we're going to set our new character blueprint as the game's default in the world settings. It's as simple as selecting it from the drop-down menu. Next, we open our project settings so that we can add an input mapping. This is going to be the button we press to trigger an interaction. Make sure you use a meaningful name. Let's open up our Blueprint interface now. In here, we're going to create a new function and add a float input and output to it. We'll come back to those later. I label any of my functions with F_, then something descriptive. This function is the core of what we're doing in this tutorial. When we later add this interface to our blueprints that we want to have the interaction capability, doing that will let us call, meaning use, this function inside of that blueprint. Let's add the interfaces to our blueprints now. The Interfaces menu is found in Class Settings inside of our blueprint. We click on the Add button and select our Blueprint interface from the drop-down menu. Remember to compile and save. We'll do this same process again for the other blueprint we've made. Each blueprint can have multiple interfaces added to it to add different features. We're going to start some visual scripting next. Think of it like drag and drop coding. We'll code our character blueprint first, so go ahead and open that one up. The first of our code goes into the event graph. Let's create an input action event that will trigger when we press the interaction button that we chose earlier. Right-click and start typing the name we gave it in our project settings. Drag and drop from our capsule component to create a reference to it in the graph. We're going to use the getOverlappingActors node to get an array, meaning a list, of nearby actors that overlap our capsule component. I set the filter to only find actors, which are the objects we place into our game world. Now, we're going to use a for loop to search our list of actors for an interactable one. Plug the overlapping actors array output into our loop's array input. Dragging off the array element output lets us add the doesImplementInterface node. We can use this to check if the current item on the list that the loop is looking at does use the interface we tell it to search for. We use the return value of this check to create a branch. False means an actor using the interface was not found, so we continue the loop. True means we found the actor with the correct interface. So we're going to save a reference to that actor inside a variable that we can use again later. We'll want to break the loop now that we have our actor to save our computer some unnecessary steps. Finally, we want to actually call the interaction function and select its message option. This will let us send a message to the actor we just found, with the instruction to execute its own copy of the interaction function. The input float we added when we created our interface shows up on this node as well. We can use this to send some data in the message from our character over to the object we are now interacting with. This float could be a variable for health or damage, but we could even send a reference to some other actor if we had added that type of input to the interface. Speaking of references, the variable we made to store the reference to the actor we found in our loop is used as the target for our interface message. That's how we'll tell this message where it's supposed to be going. Let's comment our finished code and move on to our interactable object next. Let's start in the viewport this time. Add a box collision to the scene and drag it into the root of the scene as well. This collision box is what lets our character blueprint know that it's overlapping with this actor. This collision box is why the Get Overlapping Actors node in our character blueprint will work. Add a static mesh as well, so we have something we can see in our game. Move the mesh to the center if you'd like, and resize the collision box bounds to be a bit larger than the mesh itself. That's how we set up the interaction range in this setup. Add a text render to the scene. We'll use this text to visualize how the interface is letting the character blueprint pass its float variable's contents in the interface message to this blueprint. Next, let's make a variable to hold that incoming data. Now, we'll open up our interaction function from the Interfaces tab. This function will execute each time our blueprint receives the interaction message from our character. We're going to set our float text by adding the input float from our message to the current value of our float text. Then we'll drag and drop a reference to the text render into our graph. This is so that we can use its setText method to change the text that we can see in game to show our float text variable's current value. Now we can compile and save and test it all out. We can use this kind of functionality to open doors, pick up items, deal damage, and much more. Thanks for following along. Remember to like and subscribe, and leave a comment about what I should cover next. Goodbye for now.